Good morning, everybody. That was so Mr. Rogers, I freaking hate it. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel, and it is a lovely morning yet again. A little gloomy outside here in Texas, but you know, hey, that's what we deal with every so often. So in today's video, I wanted to go over 5 tips that I wish I had when I started making videos. This video is not gonna be a super explanation video into how each of these things work, but basically just an overall generalization of what I think would be most beneficial to kind of learn or teach yourself first when starting to make videos. If you guys are new to my channel, my name is Evan Andrews, and on this channel we are doing everything creative from filmmaking, photography, graphic design, you name it, we do it here on this channel. If you are not a subscriber of mine, make sure you go now and hit the subscribe button. Like this video so that I know you guys enjoy this kind of content that I'm making for you. I'm here to help you guys make your life and your journey, especially at the beginning, a lot easier in getting into the creative world. Like I said, today's video is gonna be 5 tips that, again, I wish I had when I was getting started in video. When I was getting started in video, I was just willy-nilly running around trying to just capture footage. I had a lot that I didn't learn in my first several years of using a camera and creating videos that after a certain point, once I learned all this knowledge, my videos definitely took a step up in the quality and everything that goes into it. So tip number 1 in being a better videographer, filmmaker is understanding frame rates. So for frame rates, the easiest way to kind of think about it is the higher the frame rate, the more smooth it will be later in post if you maybe slow it down. At 24 frames per second, that's standard cinema and what our eyes kind of see. And that's really a popular setting for most people looking for that cinematic style of filmmaking. For me personally, I shoot everything almost in 24 frames unless I know that I'm slowing it down. Then I'll shoot in either 60 frames or 120 frames, kind of just depending on whatever calls for at that particular time. I had this big problem at the beginning of my journey that I wouldn't really understand why I was shooting in one or the other. I would either shoot everything in 24 frames and then later be upset that I couldn't slow anything down because it looked jittery and not smooth. I would also have problems where I would shoot everything in 60 frames thinking, I don't know what I'm gonna slow down, but I would have small issues like audio syncing become a problem and not getting that smooth motion blur that really makes our images and video look high quality. So that's the first thing that I would get into, would be understanding your frame rates and when to use them. Second on the list would be understanding the exposure triangle. Now this is gonna be all within the settings of the camera that you're using. Assuming that you have like a DSLR or a mirrorless camera and there's a manual exposure setting within the camera, you can manipulate these 3 points and aspects to have a better quality image. So the 3 points of the exposure triangle are your shutter speed, your aperture, and your ISO, and these all work together to create your image. So your shutter speed is how fast the shutter opens and closes. The aperture is what is in focus in your depth of field, and ISO is basically just artificial light that the camera pumps into the image to brighten it up. Each of these have their different drawbacks. If you have too high of an ISO, you could get grainy footage. If you have too high of an aperture, then you're gonna have too many things in focus, and a lot of people like that blurry background, so they wanna keep that low. If your shutter speed's off, it can really mess with the motion blur in the image. And having something that matches what our eye likes to see naturally is usually what gives you the best quality. Now you can turn up or down your shutter speed to manipulate your image again, but it will affect the natural motion blur that you do see in the final footage. So that is something that you want to keep in mind. The general rule of thumb is you want to keep your shutter speed twice the frame rate that you're shooting in. So we're going back to frame rates and see how they kind of all work together. So for the most smooth and natural looking motion blur, you want to have your shutter speed at, again, twice your frame rate. So if you're shooting in 24 frames, you want your shutter speed to be at 1/50. If you're shooting something slow motion at 60 frames, you want your shutter speed at 120. And if you're shooting something at even a slower speed at 120 frames, you're gonna want a 240 shutter speed when you are shooting. Now, obviously the higher the shutter speed, you're gonna need more light, and that has other factors that come in with your setup. So that's just something to keep in mind when you are shooting and when you are creating. And the third thing is having a basic understanding of lighting. In most cases, a basic understanding of 3-point lighting, Rembrandt lighting, whatever you want to call it. Understanding lighting is very crucial because with the lights in the right placement, it allows you to have your exposure triangle at the values that you want to have them at. Lighting can also do other things like create a lot of depth in the image. Having background lights is very crucial. Lighting the scene behind the subject is just as crucial as lighting the subject, as that is what creates depth and is very visual appealing to the eye. So having a basic understanding of lighting is very crucial. Now, this is not something that you have to kill yourself over, and you don't have to have expensive quality lights either. You can get away with having a lower quality setup, maybe about $120, $150 package of lights. That's what I'm currently using for this setup. I'm just using 2 newer lights on stands. They are bicolor, so I can, change the temperature and things like that. But with very minimal things, you can create high quality visuals. The number one kind of scene that I would recommend starting with, because it doesn't move, is learning how to set up an interview. Learning how to light a subject that's sitting still, and learning how to light a background is where I would start in figuring out how to manipulate light. It gets much harder when you have to move the camera or there's movement within the scene. Keeping the lights out of the scene and really just getting what you need is just a lot more difficult when the camera moves. So that's why I suggest learning how to maybe light an interview first, where there's a stagnant subject and you can really just focus on the lighting itself. Moving on to tip number 4 that I wish I had when I was starting was understanding the importance of sound. So sound was something that I mentioned in a previous video when I worked on a documentary series that I really started doing a lot more of. If you missed that video, you can go up here and catch it right now. So sound is very crucial because it's just that layer an element into a video that is kind of an afterthought in most cases. A lot of people don't realize that when they're watching a documentary or they're watching something on Netflix, that sound is really what is carrying you from scene to scene, from image to image. It's not just the visual. If you were to completely mute the TV, you would have no idea what's going on in most cases. So sound is just one of those things that when you learn how to manipulate it, when you learn how to record high quality sound, and when you learn how to inject it into your videos, it's only going to make your video quality that much higher. So getting into understanding sound is definitely a crucial tip that I would say you need to look into when beginning to make videos. And rounding out the list with tip number 5, and I would say this is the most important one to kind of focus on the science of, is the composition of a frame. More importantly, kind of the rule of thirds. If you watch anything on TV, basically anything that is a high quality production of something, you will see the science of this portrayed out throughout the whole entire thing. So basically the rule of thirds is just how weighted out the scene is. You may have seen in a camera or on a camera monitor a tic-tac-toe board that's on there, and it has 4 intersecting points. It's scientifically proven that our eyes are drawn to these 4 intersecting points, not the middle of the frame. And if you can place your subject or your focal area in any one of those spots, it subconsciously tells the viewer that this is a pleasing image to look at. Now, you can use a lot of different techniques and qualities in composing an image. It doesn't have to just be the subject. You can use things like vertical lines in, let's say, a building, or leading lines in maybe a bridge or something that create a nice, interesting image to look at. And then place your possibly moving subject or stagnant subject on one of those points that you see on the tic-tac-toe board inside of the camera. And 9 times out of 10, that's gonna be a more appealing image than maybe something just shot point of view style. Also, more often than not, a well-composed image will hide the discrepancies of maybe something else that was not done maybe 100% correctly in filming. So let's say your lighting's a little bit off, but if you have a well-composed image, as long as it overall is visually appealing, the lighting that's lacking kinda is okay in the grand scheme of things. You can kind of equate to having good composition and composing a nice shot to like a painter painting a painting. Most of the time they don't place the subject right in the middle of the paper. They'll place it off to the left or off to the right. Or if they do place it right in the middle, they will place things to the left and right of it in a way to kind of balance out what they want to do with the image. So that's why I think composition is really the #1 important thing that you learn and teach yourself in starting with video. So that's gonna do it for today's video. I wanted to keep it short and sweet. And again, I didn't want to get into in-depth describing each of these different tips. I want you guys to take this list of tips out and kind of do your own research and figure out what works best for you in the way that you learn. I taught myself a lot of these tips after I, did a lot of searching around on the internet, and definitely YouTube. Here on YouTube, this is the biggest way to learn any kind of hobby or trade or anything like that these days. Go out there, look online, and see what you guys can find as other tools to help you take this list of tips to the next level. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you liked it, and subscribe to me now if you're not a subscriber. It's gonna help me in the long run and help you guys in the long run get off to a better start with creating video and being in this creative world. I can't thank you guys enough for all the support that I've had so far. I hope to keep growing my community here, and if I can make an impact on any of y'all's lives, that's just a win for me too. Now, I probably will do videos explaining each of these tips a little bit more in depth, but we'll figure that out once I figure out what you guys want to hear from me. So again, go leave me a comment. Let me know how you like this video. So thanks again for joining me, guys, and I will see you next week on another video. Peace out.